Welcome to You Got Moxie, the podcast about the how of change making. I'm your host, Julie Ann Crommett, and today we're thrilled to welcome Daisy Auger-Dominguez. Daisy is a leader, author, speaker, expert on future-readying workforces, and also a dear friend and DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion practitioner. She shares her powerful journey from the U.S. to the Dominican Republic, or DR, and back to the U.S., and how it shaped her passion for DEI. Daisy discusses navigating systemic exclusion, building impactful DEI strategies, and overcoming resistance in the workplace. Together, we explore the importance of self-awareness, setting boundaries, and finding joy to drive sustainable change and leadership. Welcome, Daisy. We're so excited that you're here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me, Julie. And
oh my God. Oh, you got it. Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Also, for those who are watching on video, Daisy's glasses are amazing, and we respect that here at You Got Moxie.
Oh, your glasses are pretty cool.
Thank you, love. Thank you. I preempted Barbie. That's what I always say. I got them in June of last year. Of 2023 for us dating it. So I love, Daisy, for you to share a little bit with our listeners. I've known you a long time, but to share with our listeners a little bit about your story, like who you are, how you came to where you are now, and maybe specifically if you could illuminate a moment where you realized change needed to happen, that it was time. And it could be small, big, whatever. But if you could share that as part of your story, that'd be awesome.
Oh, of course. Thank you, Julianne. Well, I mean, as you know, I am a Dominican and Puerto Rican woman. I was born in New York City to teenage parents who wisely recognized that they were ill-prepared to raise me. And my paternal grandparents offered to raise me in the Dominican Republic. And so I did the opposite migratory pattern. I left the country when I was about 2 years old, grew up in the DR, the Dominican Republic, for those who are not familiar with the acronym. And when I was growing up, I was essentially the fourth child of elder parents who had suffered through a brutal dictatorship, had left their country to survive, and then had come back and were essentially in the second stage of their lives. So I grew up with a lot of older people around me, a lot of order and seriousness and fear, quite frankly, that had seeped over by generations. And then I also had the privilege of studying at an international school. So that's where I learned English. But it's not just where I learned the language that has really become my professional language and my way of communicating with the world, but it's also where I studied with kids from all over the world. My best friends growing up were Chinese and Danish and Costa Rican. And I say that because I grew up with this rich tapestry of understanding of nationality and legacy, cultural legacy, but I was also part of the majority. And then when I was 16, I moved to New Jersey. And I became part of this community, right? It's like I was put in this box. You're Hispanic, and that is what you're going to be in the context of U.S. identity. And that's when I started understanding this paradigm that you and I know very well now professionally, the us versus them, identity politics, all of these things that I had not grown up with. And I took that with me to college. And then I took that with me to my first job. And all throughout college, I should say, I became hyper-focused on understanding race, class, and gender. I wanted to understand it within the U.S. context on how that manifested for people. I never thought I would do that professionally, right? But I was talking about intersectionality before people thought it was like a cool thing to talk about. I studied that in undergrad. I studied that at NYU, where I studied with Professor Walter Stafford, who was an expert in the field. And then I go to the workplace, and all of these themes and identity formulations that I had studied, I started witnessing that systemic exclusion of people every in very subtle ways, right? You and I have seen it, right? All of a sudden, there's talent of color in the organization. You see them one day and you don't see them the next, and nobody talks about why they left, right? Right? You talk about performance reviews, and you see how some people's performance reviews language, right, is dramatically different and more stringent than others, and yet they're performing at the same level, and you're like, there's something going on here. I remember the assistant who once told me, you should not have lunch with all the Black and brown people because that will not be good for your career. I was like, wait, what does that mean? And how is this, this woman who's actually trying to help me, right? And it's she's coming from a good place, but she's absorbing and watching the signals and looking out for me, essentially telling me to be more white, right? Essentially telling me that is how you will succeed if you are more white.
Yep.
And so I had all those messages, and I worked at Moody's for 12 years and 6 years as a credit risk analyst, 3 years running the company's foundation. And then I was tapped to lead the company's diversity and inclusion function. And, you asked me about a pivotal moment in my career. And for me, it was first declining the role because this was in 2007. And so for me, it wasn't just that I didn't know what diversity, equity, and inclusion was from a professional lens, right? I was like, yeah, I know I'm brown, right? Like I know these things about me, but is that a job? But it was also that it was putting me in HR. And as we all know, and it's still unfortunately the same story, HR is the function most loved to be hated, right? And most misunderstood. And I had a great career on the business side of the company. And so for me, it felt like almost a demotion, even though it was a promotion. I was becoming a vice president. But it felt like I was going to go somewhere where I wasn't going to grow. And it was that career shift that changed everything for me, because it was where I realized the greatest asset that an organization had was the humans in this organization. And if we did not manage them in a way that allowed them to thrive and to deliver at their best capacity, then we were failing them, and we were failing as an organization, right? As a business-minded person, for me, it was not just the humanity of it, which was critical, but it was recognizing, I was like, you're leaving money on the table because you are spending money to hire really talented folks, and then you're sucking the magic out of them when they get here. So for me, it was that recognition that this field and this function that I had, quite frankly, devalued and questioned, was the most important work that I could do in my life, and that's what I was going to dedicate myself to.
It's amazing. And the aha moment resonates very deeply with me, as you might imagine. A similar experience, right? There's this job in diversity and drama programming. What the heck does that mean? Yes. Beyond my lived experience, just I'm an advocate. Yeah. By the way, I don't know if we've ever talked about this explicitly in your story and my story overlap, but I also studied in college around race, identity, intersectionality, because I was trying to understand myself in a U.S. context, because I'm from Puerto Rico, and I was trying to figure all that out. And I grew up in the American South. And so I resonate deeply with that part of your story. Yeah. And I think what's really interesting about your aha moment is it was this moment of centered on people that unlock business opportunity, and that we're not maximizing talent in a way that is, productive or for the organization or for them. And so
absolutely. Right. You and I have both worked on the business side. I was taught by some of the best analysts. I was an airport analyst. So my job was to crunch numbers to ensure that airports were maximizing their revenue so they could pay back their debt, right? Like that was essentially at the end of the day what I was doing. And I would remember my manager and the leader I worked with, we would go around airports, and he would literally find all the pockets of where he would say, you're leaving money on the table, right? There could be a concession here. There could be a consumer-led initiative here. I remember that, and it was a mindset that I gained. And then I go into HR, and I had the same exact experience. I was like, you are leaving money on the table. You are diminishing the most important asset of this organization for what? For bias, for power, right? For, abuse, right? Like all of that to me was just so clear. And there's certainly the heart piece of this work, which I always lean on, but I can't help but, to your point, having a business perspective on it. I was like, it's just poor business decisioning.
Correct. 100%. 100%. And I think, something that you're hitting on, and I ask every guest this as well, because there's that moment, right? And I'm sure our listeners at home are relating with this, where there's a moment of, oh my God, something has to change. This is not right. It's not fair. This is broken, right? However you want to define it. And then you start pulling on that thread and it becomes bigger and bigger. And then you realize there's all these things that need to change to make this possible, right? And so the question becomes, where do I start? How do I know where to start? Like, how do I make that decision? What does that mean? And so my question for you is, you had this aha moment, or maybe a different aha moment during your career journey, your life journey. How did you know where to start? And if you can kind of ruminate a little bit on advice on how to think about starting, especially when things can feel overwhelming.
And it is overwhelming, because when you think about the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's about systemic exclusion. There's so much conversation now about, DEI and, not having earned your positions, whatever. I was like, we don't spend enough time talking about all of the unearned access and opportunity that exists in organizations. And, and that is because it is also built in this, bedrock of systemic exclusion. And if you start looking at it that way, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to fix it. What happens? And so my first answer is always just put one foot in front of the other, right? Just figure out what works for you. And it's going to take time. It took time for me. I was fortunate that I landed in this space, and I went in kicking and screaming to HR, of course, but that I landed in a space that allowed me to start seeing the connections. And I think we need to become wise to the things that are said and the things that are unsaid, right? Where the threads are. And for me, it was starting to learn about benefits and compensation and performance management and recruiting, and starting to see, because I love data like you, starting to see the uneven pathways for individuals and thinking, well, this is not because of capacity and skill set. This is because of different vantage points and access and opportunity. So how do we start leveling that up? And for me, it was about, what role do I want to play in leveling up the systems so that workplaces truly work for everyone? And I learned, and I started in different places. So I started with recruiting, because diversity recruiting is really what most companies want to spend time and energy. And I remember fighting that concept and going, well, I can't just focus on recruiting, because then we have to focus on retention. We have to focus on all these elements. And I said, well, let me get to that, but let me figure out recruiting first. How do we reduce bias in entry points? And if we're going to reduce operational biases, I can also attack the behavioral biases that not only show up when you're hiring someone, but that also show up when you are performance managing someone, right? That also show up when you are considering advancing someone, right? So then you start thinking about it, and this is what my first book, Inclusion Revolution, is. It's about the entire employee life journey. So I started mapping out the entire employee life journey, from when you get sourced to when you are recruited, to when you get placed, to when you get your first advancement opportunity, to even sometimes your exit. Where are the interventions that we can take? And so for me, to your point about the unraveling and all the things, it's, what's the intervention I can focus on today? What's the entry point that I can help create? What's the awareness that I can help build? What is, because it's about systems and processes that can outlast us. What are the systems and processes that I can help create so that when and if I am not here, this work continues? So that's what's allowed me to figure out my entry points, right? I find the entry points, and then I connect them and go on to the next ones. And I focus on building solutions that will outlast me, that will be systemic, that will be structural, so that they truly address change on a sustainable basis.
That's right. Exactly right. And I think starting with one thing is probably the best piece of advice. As you were saying, the thing that was right in front of you, the thing that you can directly impact and influence. Like, don't try to be going to 4 other departments that you don't work in on a regular basis, road to nowhere. Yes, exactly. And I think about, on that journey, right? You've taken the first step. You started to make some impact in whatever field, your community, whatever it might be that you're trying to make change in. and you hit an obstacle. You start to hit resistance. We all know it. Anybody listening is probably like, yes. I'm dealing with that right now. And you're like, okay, what do I do now? Or where do I go from here? So if you could share a little bit about, and I know you have plenty of anecdotes about this because you and I have been in it together. What's some advice when you think about, okay, you're on the journey, and you meet that roadblock or that resistance? How do you think about working through that, or, taking a different pathway? What advice do you have for folks as, they're thinking about the challenges they're running into?
The first thing that I'll say is that anything I can share as a learning is because I've made all the mistakes before.
That's exactly right.
I'll admit it. I am, as you know, I am naturally impatient. I want change now. I have had to learn how to navigate workplaces. And so what I can share now is through sheer lived experience of having done all the things and mostly wrong, but picked myself up to try and get them done the right way. I think that for most of us, we're going to face roadblocks, right? This work of changing systems and processes and structures is mired in resistance. And it's mired in misinformation and fear, a lot of fear that is misconstrued and unbased most of the time, but it's there. And so my advice is often really deepen your situational awareness. And by that is not just understanding the context in which you operate, how power moves where you operate, how decisions get made, who makes those decisions, but also as you're doing this external analysis, if you will, it's also about the deep self-reflection of,
yes,
how do I want to show up no matter what is being handed to me? Because many of us carry wounds, right? Of having worked in places where we have been shut down, childhood wounds of having been rejected and pushed away, that sometimes just have this nasty habit of manifesting in moments where you actually need to really hold it together and be aware of how you show up. So for me, it's been about recognizing, and now I've been at this for several decades. So I often joke, I'm like, I've seen this movie play out before. I know who's going to say what, and I'm going to find my entry point so that I can satisfactorily sort of get through this moment by building shared understanding. I've learned that it's not about me winning. It's not about me getting the last word, but it's about creating space for people to see themselves in the solution, to see how they can be connected to doing something better. Because I do fundamentally believe that we all come to workplaces because we want to do the things that we can't do on our own, right? We want to do things that are bigger than us. And what gets in the way sometimes, most of the time, right? It's ego, it's power dynamics, it's all of these things that if you can just kind of move them away and say, okay, what are we solving for? And how can I help solve for something where you have a win and I have a win? It may not be the win we all want, right? I have had to learn that with age, right? It may not be everything that we want, but can we get closer to that end game that allows us to build a program that can allow individuals to, come to this organization that they couldn't before, that can allow us to address some of the systemic biases that exist in how we performance manage and advance folks, right? Whatever it is that you want to solve for, that it's not just about me winning, but it's really about a shared win for folks. And that allows me to not just deepen my situational awareness, but also be very present in what are my triggers, right? Where because sometimes I can be my own worst enemy, and I can be going into a situation, thinking Julianne is totally against me. And actually Julianne has no idea what she's against. She's just trying to figure out her day and figure out how to move on. So it's that balance of your self-reflection, deep self-reflection and situational awareness that allows us to see things for what they truly are, and that allows us to build shared understanding and shared wins.
I love this, the idea of shared wins and shared understanding. And I think something you talked about, which I feel so deeply about, and you and I've talked about this before, which is like the inventory of self as part of that. And something that you said, and listeners at home, this is so important, which is if you expect people to change and move and be open, you too have to be willing to change and move and be open and do that work. Because otherwise, why would someone else do it if you yourself are not willing to do it? And I think that is a profound learning over the years. And I think you're absolutely right, because that leads you to the shared win when you do that, right?
We all want to feel seen, valued, and understood. All of us, no matter where we sit politically, from a power dynamic, that is a shared human experience. So how do you safeguard everyone's dignity, right? And I learned that the hard way, Julianne, right? Because I have been on the front of, I am fighting for the dignity of the most underserved, of the most underrepresented. And here I am abusing the dignity of the person that I'm actually trying to get something from. I was like, right? I'll fully admit it, right? I have been in those moments where I've had to, and I've been burned. And it's the recognition of, it's about upholding everyone's dignity. That's the universal.
Correct. And what I'm asking you to do is to join me in that journey of upholding everybody's dignity, yourself included. But that also means a lot of people that maybe you haven't been thinking about.
That's right.
And that's the shared, right?
And that's where we can come in. That's where we come in and we meet each other halfway.
That's exactly right. Oh, Daisy, your lips, my friend, to God's ears. It's 1,000. And I want us to end on probably one of the most pertinent topics for you today, and quite frankly, in the workforce today, which is around burnout. It's around languishing, and these feelings, and quite frankly, this crisis that we're in, let's just name it, of what it is, mental health, spiritual health, being able to recharge for real, and not in the like, oh, I took a break for a day. And so I'd love to hear from you and hear about your book as part of this too, which is sort of, what do you do to recharge, to replenish, to fill your cup, whatever that might mean to you, but that also you've written about this recently, and this book is coming out this week, which we're so excited to promote it here on the podcast, Burnt Out to Lit Up. So if you could talk a bit about yourself, but also probably it was the motivation, I would imagine, to look at this topic. So we'd love to hear from you on it.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Julianne. Well, as you know, I delivered actually my first TEDx talk, Inclusion Revolution, and wrote my first book, Inclusion Revolution, out of a fervent belief that organizational health, growth, and dynamism thrive where diversity, equity, and inclusion bloom, right? That has been a driving force in my career. But, I also know that to lead and reshape systems is relentless, complex, and often fraught with depletion and skepticism and resistance to change, right? And those are the moments when we need to carve out space for ourselves to pause, to reflect, to recharge, to reset. But we don't, right? Most of the time we're just running and pushing through. And the lesson that I share in the book and that I have learned the hard way is that to lead change, to lead people, we have got to be right within. We have got to stay strong and inspired ourselves. And so my second book, Burnt Out to Lit Up, which comes out this week, and I'm so very excited, it's a response to the pressures of navigating this terrain of leadership in this messy world that we live in, skillfully while also maintaining your humanity. Right? I offer tips and case studies of burnout and resilience. I talk about my burnout story, the many stories I've had, because I've had burnout several times, and guide readers through scripts and through reflections and through guidance and tips on how to replenish your energy and reignite your inner spark. Because the work of building truly inclusive and high-performing workplaces needs all of us. And I've learned that in order for me to be the best leader that I want to be, and I believe leadership is a calling. I believe leadership is the highest form of service that we can provide. I need to be right within. That means that I need to set my boundaries, right? Because when you set your boundaries, you tell the world that you matter, right? I need to affirm my worth, and I need to be clear and intentional with my yeses, right? What am I saying yes to that is my highest and best use? And how do I can serve you better, not by being the one in the room, right? But by being able to guide you to where the right solutions and efforts and folks are, versus me always sucking everything out of me, right? Because you can't pour from an empty cup. So I fill up my cup in a million ways, right? For me, it's my family. For me, it's reading. For me, it's these conversations, right? I energize by talking to amazing and beautiful people like you that give me hope. Because sometimes we have to replenish not just our energy cups, but we have to replenish our hope and our joy and our optimism. The book is called Burnt Out to Lit Up: How to Reignite the Joy of Leading People. I wanted to really focus on joy because joy for me is the energizer and the North Star that we all seek. And it's not a constant state. I'm not joyous every moment of the day, right? But it is that constant play of finding those moments that really light me up, that allow me to light others as well, right? Like allow me to light them up as well. So it's through rest, it's through relaxation, it's through finding the things that make me happy. And all of us have different things that make us happy. And sometimes it's the talking, sometimes it's the watching Emily in Paris with my daughter last night.
I have already binged the new season. And I know that for anybody on Netflix, this is shameless. Here we are.
Okay, right? Gilmore Girls for the 5th time with my daughter, right? All of these are pieces that make me happy because I love content, right? So it's binge watching a series, but it's also going outside with my daughter for a walk. It is, my husband is obsessed with lighthouses right now. So it is planning our trip to see the next lighthouse that makes him happy, because when he's happy, I'm happy, right? It's all of these moments that are constantly replenishing my cup so that I can show up as my best self no matter what's handed to me.
That's exactly right. And the joy, I think, people forget it can just be small things. Over time, they are deposits, keep depositing in yourself, I think about like a piggy bank, and you keep every day you just put a quarter in or a penny, but like how important that is, because it really does fill up the piggy,
I love it.
And then when you have to deplete it, right, all the coins don't have to leave once, right?
You're right. You can selectively decide.
You can open a little bit and then plug it again, Thank you again for coming on, Daisy. We're just so thrilled to have had you here, and for your latest book, Burnt Out to Lit Up. Everybody go pick up a copy. Daisy, thank you so much again.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure. I appreciate everything that you do.
Thanks again for joining us for You Got Moxie. Make sure to check out Daisy's new book, Burnt Out to Lit Up: How to Reignite the Joy of Leading People, wherever books are sold. And support your local booksellers, please. Continue to follow us and listen to your favorite episodes at collectivemoxie.com. That's collective, MOXIE.com. We're excited to see you next time. Take care.